Archbishop LeFevre, he was just questioning, why do we have to destroy everything that came before the council? Tens of thousands of priests were leaving the priesthood in the 70s.
Just for truth in advertising, I find myself in the middle of the debate. I'm sympathetic to those that go to chapel, and I'm sympathetic to the intention of the SSPX, but I do have some reservations. But let's talk about...
In these circumstances that you're faced yourself in, for the good of your family, go to a community that go to them that are organising the Mass. So in a pragmatic way, that's how I approached it. And I found their families, their priests, very good people. They are not the church, but they are society in the church trying their best. I don't think they're perfect, but I certainly don't think they are bad Catholics. They're actually really well-formed intellectually, love the faith. And that's been my experience with them. And I suppose I have to go back then a little bit. 30 years ago, I was actually a seminarian in Switzerland, very, very near a con with the Legionaries of Christ. And I remember us saying, those schismatics down there, they've left the church and we're the future of the church. We're the new, the springtime of the church. And I suppose 30 years later, we learn different lessons of our own experiences in the church. And that's really where my position sits with the society. I think we need intellectual honesty to examine the life of Archbishop Marcel LeFevre. We have to engage with that debate in the church and honestly examine what he said and what he taught with charity, to look at his life with charity, not write him off.
In this video, you actually compared and contrast somewhat your experience as a seminarian, as you said a minute ago, in the Legionnaires of Christ, and Marcel, the founder of the Legionnaires, and his reputation versus LeFevre. LeFevre, I think, at the end of the day, you might fault some of his decision-making or you might fault some of the conclusions, but I don't know that you can fault his zealousness and his desire to spread the true, the good, the beautiful, the rich patrimony of Holy Mother Church. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I mean, any of us that go to traditional Latin Mass, and I don't want to make an idol out of the form of the Mass. I don't want to idolize the traditional Mass of its sense, but I want to go beyond that and go back to encountering Christ as my grandparents encountered them, great grandparents. Archbishop LeFevre, if you read his life and look at what he was saying, he was just questioning, why do we have to destroy everything that came before the council? Because he lived through tumultuous times in the 70s and 80s. Let's remember, tens of thousands of priests were leaving the priesthood in the 70s. Who could not be moved by what they saw in the 70s and say, well, look, let's not destroy everything that was there before the council. Let's preserve what was good, true, and beautiful. And the Mass before Second Vatican II was good, true, and beautiful. Pope Benedict said this to us. What previous generations held sacred is sacred and great to us too. And I think the church, in this consultation process in Traditionis, they never asked us laity. They never came and spoke to us. What are your views? What are your experiences encountering traditional Latin Mass? And I think the church should treasure their traditions. They should build on these traditions. They should examine what Archbishop Marcel LeFevre was saying in the 1970s, especially that decade of the 1970s. I asked the church to go back, examine what he said, what was happening, how did he see the church? And if we did this, maybe we would be stronger as a church if we came together to understand what the great Archbishop Marcel LeFevre was saying in that decade. And I think, he certainly didn't do everything perfectly, but we certainly can't see him as an evil, corrupt archbishop. He wasn't. We know that now. So the re-examination of his life has to take place in the church at this time.
Tell me about this bishop. Who is he? Why is he living with the SSPX? He certainly seems to be fully on board at this point with the SSPX position.
So Bishop Huonder, there was a statement that was pushed out a few years ago on the SSPX site where Bishop Vitus has retired to the SSPX. And he has been saying Mass in their seminary in Germany and in a con and living with the SSPX for the last number of years. He was sent by the Vatican to talk to them. And with permission from Pope Francis, he retired to the SSPX, where he has been ministering. And you can look up the videos. They're all there on YouTube. He's there in their seminary with SSPX priests, with SSPX seminarians, offering the sacrifice of the Mass. For example, when his priestly anniversary was taking place, his Mass was said in an SSPX chapel with the Swiss guards present, with SSPX priests present. So this isn't new news, guys. This has been there we've all been following this story for the last number of years. And it's only now that this documentary is coming out that Bishop Vitus is starting to, explain his journey, what he's been doing over the last number of years. And I think we need to have a charitable, intellectual debate on this now, on what we're going to do in the church, because the SSPX, they have Catholic DNA through and through them. I mean, they're not perfect, but they're also not non-Catholic. They are, quintessentially Catholic. I mean, and it's fascinating to see what's going to happen now in the next number of years with this debate around tradition, around the Mass, and around liturgy, and around teaching the Catholic faith.
Let's talk about the specific statement that the bishop made. And he says that Pope Francis spoke to me and said that the SSPX are not schismatics. Now, what do you make of that statement? Because when I go watch all these commentaries, it does seem that if you're totally for it, then you see that as 100%. But if you're totally against, you see that in a nuanced way. What do you say, Robert Nugent?
Those that will be against this will say, well, where is the official statement from the Vatican, from Pope Francis, saying that they're not in schism? Because there is this debate happening in the church. Bishop Vitus isn't any bishop in the church. He was sent by Cardinal Gerhard Müller to talk to the SSPX. He has been in conversation with the Pope. And we should all pray and all hope and all dialogue that we come together as one church, that we walk together in union with the Holy Father. So it's in our interest now as laymen, as Catholics, to listen to what Bishop Vitus is saying, because there are a lot of things that Archbishop Marcel LeFevre got right. I mean, we saw the crazy formation in seminaries in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. The SSPX, they're never going to get 100% right. They've had issues in their priesthood, and Church Militant has rightly reported on them. However, they've also, stood up for the Catholic faith. They've tried their best to retain what was good in the way the church operated before Vatican II. So, there has to be mutual enrichment now in the church, where we can learn as a church what happened in the last 50 years to be able to walk forward. And that's why, Bishop Vitus, he isn't Bishop Athanasius Schneider. He is, complementary to what Bishop Athanasius has been saying, is the Pope has said this in the past. They're not in schism, in the sense that they do not deny that that Pope Francis is Pope. They do not deny that the Church has hierarchy, bishops, and we need to dialogue with them. We need to talk together.
The other side would push back and they would say, but they remain in an irregular situation, goodwill, good intention, but yet we're still not there.
Indeed, because we do need official canonical documents to understand what is their exact position in the church. But let's not kid ourselves, Joe. We are in the greatest confusion that the Catholic Church has ever faced. We just have to look a few hundred miles above Switzerland to see what German bishops have actually done. Guys, we can't decide what's male or female anymore in the church, and we can't decide what is the sacrament of marriage or what marriage was designed for. We have to preach the truth in charity. The church needs to step in and provide leadership on what the deposit of the faith actually is. And this is what Archbishop LeFevre was calling out. We need to interpret Second Vatican II in light of tradition, not in light of what we think it said. It has to be viewed in the lens, in the scope of the tradition of the Catholic Church. especially the liturgy. You know, having the liturgy in the vernacular, and Pope Benedict mentioned, was a good development, but it has to be performed in light of tradition. And we see the craziness that's happened in the church. We've seen a craziness in the synodal process. And I'm not the only one calling it out. There's many priests and bishops around the world calling out the confusion in the church, and the SSPX are asking what is going on, and we're all asking the same question.